All right.
Hey.
Good. So, welcome.
Hey.
I'm Viviam Maria, and we are live here. And before I go into our conversation with my very special guest in this wonderful rendezvous with two amazing people, I'm going to give you a little bit of introduction. You know them well, but of course, we're going to give a little information on them. So, first, I'd like to introduce actor director Matt Dillon. As an actor, some of his films include The Outsiders, Drugstore Cowboy, There's Something About Mary, and Academy Award winner for Best Picture, Crash. As director, you can enjoy his first film, which was the 2002 narrative feature City of Ghosts. Now, he just premiered recently his second film and his first documentary, Gran Fellové, which will be a big part of our conversation tonight. And up next, I'd like to introduce to you now someone who is overseeing this project as co-producer, Joey Altruda, a multi-instrumentalist, band leader, music producer, DJ, record collector, and in more recent years, a hemp health advocate. Young from Los Angeles, Joey's 40-year career has brought him into work and association with such luminaries as Seu Jorge, Screaming Jay Hawkins, Bo Diddley, Sugar King Harris, Tom Waits, Joe Strummer, Ernest Rangi, and so many other icons of music. And speaking of icons, tonight we are going to be connecting from three different points from New York City, from Oregon, and from Miami to celebrate music, friendship, and the life and legacy of a Gran Fellové, who a day like today's his birthday, he would have been 97 years old. So, welcome, Joey and Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Viviam. It's great to see you again.
Likewise, my God, what a beautiful rendezvous. 2013, the year that Fellove passed away, was the last time that we were able to see each other, the three of us together, So, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's great to be on the show, and it's great to see Joey. We're on a radio show here. He's in Oregon, and we're all in different points, as you said. And but it was as soon as I saw you, I was like, "Oh wow, this is a reunion!" It was so nice. And the only guy missing was Albertico Menendez, that great musician who was there, who recently died, but was really great.
I know. We lost him recently, a couple of months ago. And I know that also, and we'll be talking about the film because many of these great musicians, many of them have passed away. Of course, Gran Fellové. But I guess I want to, and this is going to be very much like having our cafecito or your favorite drink kind of conversation, and the viewers will also do the same as we enjoy this conversation and some music and talking about the documentary. So I guess if we can go first into talking a little bit about Fellove. For those listeners and viewers who are here who might have heard the name or who might be a younger generation who might not know, let's talk about Fellove.
Well, you want me to start, or
where do you want to start? I mean,
let's start back in October 7th, 1923, in Barrio Colón. That's where he was born. Mm-hmm. And you end up. I didn't know any of that stuff when I accompanied Joey while he was making the record with Fellove back then. And we didn't have that much information on him. And I think I can speak for myself, but I think Joey were both in agreement that we had the music. That's all we had, and we loved it, and the music was great. But we didn't have that much. I didn't have much information on him. We kind of knew that he was part of the Feeling movement.
No, I haven't heard of the Feeling movement at that point.
And it's the stuff it's a good point.
It kind of got labeled from Feeling called Latin jazz. I grew up with people like Cal Tjader's music and people I knew who played in Cal Tjader's band, but I never heard of Feeling. In fact, I'd been listening to the Cuban jam session records for some years, for over 10 years. Yes, and I had no idea that the one song that I always loved to DJ with was Cimarron. I didn't know that was Fellove.
A classic.
I was listening to Fellove's record that Matt found his first album from like 1956 or so, right? And he taped the record. This is all in the film. And I'm listening to this record, and I still didn't make the connection that it was the guy from the Cuban Jam Session albums, and that he wrote a great many of those tunes. He wasn't credited for these. Everyone else was. In the past year or so, these records got remastered beautifully and repackaged, and extensive liner notes about the whole thing as a box set, right? There's 5 albums. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that aspect of it, Matt? I mean, that's kind of how me and the playing Afro-Cuban music was those records, and being brought up in California, because it came from Cuba to Mexico to California, which is the same place.
Yeah. Well, the word descarga, right? For example, according to Leonardo Acosta, right, who's a great, another one, again, no longer with us, but was one of the great voices and historians of Afro-Cuban jazz. And he also had a musical background. He was a musician. And he said that the word descarga, and he describes it quite well in the film. He says it's to discharge. We kind of knew that, but he said that it was born out of the feeling movement. So the idea of the Cuban Jam Session, he talked about, like, early on, us jazz musicians would mingle with the songwriters, the feeling guys, who were primarily guitar players and piano players, songwriters, and people like Fellove, who played a bunch of instruments. They're creative guys, and they would mix together, and that's where these things they would have these kind of gatherings in apartments. They weren't performances in nightclubs. They weren't in bars in the beginning. It really was these guys getting together and creating, And he said it was the word probably came from Jose Antonio Mendez. Correct. Because he was always coming up with words and ideas.
Right. How about we talk about, let's give people that are tuning in here who don't know any of this a little context. Descarga is referring to small group jam session also. So back in those days in Havana, especially, just like New York City with bebop, you have people that were in big bands, like 18, 20-piece big bands that are playing arranged compositions every night, but then afterwards they're going to different places and they're jamming with each other, more loose and improvisational than their set written parts that they have to read and execute and express every night. And say the Benny Goodman Orchestra, Count Basie, Ellington, they're getting together in small groups. So they were doing this, paralleling what we were doing at the same time in the 40s and the 50s.
But Joey, back to your experience. When you first got together with Fellove, it started with the jam session.
It did, of course. But the feeling, like most people don't know what we're talking about here either. Feeling, like, let's give them a little bit. Would you like to tell them?
Yeah. Well, feeling, it's true, Joey. We were talking about that. The feeling thing I really discovered when I was down there. I mean, Joey really. The interesting thing is I'm the one who said, hey, Joey, what about this guy Fellove? I learned more about Afro-Cuban music from Joey than I ever taught him anything. I mean, really, Joey's really knowledgeable and makes it enjoyable to learn about music. So that we have that's our relationship, and our friendship sort of came together on our mutual love of this music. But of course, when I got down there, Joey was busy making a record with Fellove. That was his focus.
It was so unplanned that things were so spontaneous that things were turned around, because you're thinking, could I do something to cover this amazing singer?
Yeah.
And then Joey,
all we knew were the records, in a way. I mean, and they were incredible. I mean, I don't know about you, Joey, but they went to the top of the canon for me. When I heard Fellove, they went right up there to Arsenio and Arcano. And Benny Moré, he went right up there. He didn't stop at the in the middle floors, man. He went right to the top, in my estimation.
That was top of the play, top of the top of the stack. And I have to say, you mentioned that I was a big influence on you in music and collecting. And like, just to give people a little bit more background here, when I met Matt, he was already collecting a lot of different genres of music, but one of them was Latin music, and primarily the things that were found in Manhattan, like Tito Puente, or, you know, anything that was like New Yorican and Boogaloo, or
Joe Cuba,
50s stuff, 50s, 60s stuff. But I gave him a short list of things of Cuban stuff. He said, hey, what are things I should look out for? And here's what happened. And this is about the friendship and people that collect music together. He was in a place where he could find a lot of this stuff, a lot more than where I was in California. So Matt started finding huge amounts of these artists that I was telling him about, like Chapotín, Chocolate y su estrellas, who else? You know, Arsenio Rodriguez, these people, like, he was bringing me things I would never otherwise have heard. And it was still back before, like, right when CDs are coming in, and yeah, a lot of things are coming together, but you know, you can only find this stuff, maybe like some of it we find in the Subway record shop, which was the record
I
store.
used to go down, and poor Harry Sepulveda, man. I mean, they never had air conditioning in that place.
Yeah.
And I'd be down there going, hey, what about this? And this poor guy was like, oh, not this guy again, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'd go down there and start sweating him about, hey, man, what about something that sounds more like this, you know? And
I'll always remember this, though. You went on a trip to Cuba. You used to go there kind of frequently, and you brought back one record called "This Is Feeling," was the title of the record, and it was by the trumpeter Samuel Tellez. He's
Yes,
really, really hip music. But
Yeah.
we still did. We were just finding out that feeling was some sort of movement or something. We didn't know that it was very based in bolero or songwriter form, really.
Well, I think there's still a lot of, I would like to just say something now that I've done all this extensive research and interviewed all these people. You know, I think that feeling, the one thing that, you know, after, there were two waves of feeling, right? There was the first one. And the first one was what Fellove was a part of. That was Fellove and Jose Antonio Mendez and Luis Yanez and Jorge Mason and all these people. And it was about jazz. It was about American songbook. And that was their thing, man. They were not. And then later, it became more like this cocktail music, bolero. And that was what it was. But early on, feeling definitely had a lot more of a jazz influence. And I think it's important to remember that. I think because in fact, they were songwriters. They were part of a collective of guys, and they wrote songs, and the name of they started a publishing company because they had no money, and they were getting screwed over, maybe not, but they were not being well taken care of. So they decided to start their own publishing. It was called Music Havana. And Music Havana, the output of songwriting was incredible by those guys. Jorge Zamora, he wrote so many great songs. He's known as a comedian.
Yes.
Fellove, Jose Antonio Mendez, and none of these people were recognized until much later. And they weren't. So feeling is, it's influenced by jazz. It is the mix of Cuban music and jazz, but it's not the same thing as like Chano Pozo and Chico Farrell and Machito mixing with the jazz guys in New York. It was more professional. It was more musician oriented, where the feeling thing was a little more songwriter based.
Right.
But that early period, it was really, they were doing jam sessions. It was jazz oriented. And so that's why I think sometimes people look at Fellove and go, well, was Feeling? Was he part of it? He was a part of it. He was there at the very beginning of Feeling.
We're talking about 40s, 50s, you know, and then
40s.
Late 50s, the jam sessions were happening where musicians normally were, you were seeing just a singer and maybe the pianist do a solo, but then here we have the trombonists, and then you have a Negro Vivar doing the trumpet solos, or Pucho Escalante. I mean, all kinds of things that Generoso Jimenez. So all these things that were new to people. And I remember Cachao told me when he did the jam sessions at Descargas en Miniatura, I remember he mentioned to me, I remember when we finished those Descargas, it was like 4 or 5 in the morning, and we had to come out with an armor because we didn't know if people were going to be taking it well or they're going to be throwing rocks at us, because it was so innovative, just like Fellove.
Wow, seriously, huh? I mean, that's amazing because that record you're speaking of, Descargas in Miniature, for many people here in the States, this is a desert island disc.
Yeah.
This is something that, and the band leader Rudy Regalado, he's Venezuelan, he's passed on for years, but he was in LA for years, and he had the Fellové second record. He showed it to me, and it was missing the cover, and half of it was broken off. Okay, like you couldn't listen to the first 3 songs. You could only listen to the second 3 songs on each side. He said because he got into a fight at a party when that record was new. And someone broke it, and they almost almost got a fist fight over this because certain people were really agitated, almost like when punk rock was new. That's how impact this had, where people just were like very uncomfortable with how modern this was.
Correct. And I think Fellove, same thing. He was an innovator who was a pioneer, and people were not ready for him. His genius mind and way of singing and performing. Some people, like in the documentary, call him crazy because of the way he moved and everything, but it's his style. He was a drum from the head, the feet to the head. And
he was really from Cologne. Was a rough neighborhood, but it was the neighborhood. I mean, he literally grew up. I mean, he was much younger than Chano Pozo, but he grew up about half a block away from there. And there's the Salon, California. Solar, California. I think Salon, Los Angeles is a nightclub in Mexico City. But Solar, California was a real. In fact, there's a guy that we met there. His name was Yayo, and he was beautiful, beautiful man. Who was an old rumbero from the neighborhood. And he said, I remember Fellove when he was a little boy, because he was 6 or 7 years older than Fellove. That's how old this guy was.
Wow.
And in the middle of the Solar is a giant sabo tree. What is it? It's how do you say it? Sabo, I think.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's a tree that's a very sacred tree in Ceiba, I think. I'm going to get in trouble. Because I'm not saying it right. But this tree, he remembers when it was small. He said.
Oh my gosh, really?
And he said, I remember it was a little tree. And now he was walking around it, and the tree was this enormous tree with the roots dropping down. And he was saying, I remember when it was just a little tree. And, he said to us in the interview, he said he remembered Fellove and his brother. He said everybody in the neighborhood played rumba. And he said Fellove was particularly inventive and funny in his style and the manner in which he played. And then he said, I'm 96 years old. God willing, I'll make it to 100. And that's in the film. But, we went back and he made it to 100. And I ran into his daughter and she said he died, but he did make it to 100, which was kind of beautiful. But he talked about Chano Pozo, like Chano Pozo, oh, mi amigo mío. There was this good friend. They would play rumba, So really interesting. It was I think it was a real privilege for me to be able to go, and it was a lot of work putting the film together, but it was a real privilege to talk to a lot of these folks and give voice to their experience in their lives,
Joey, people out there what the film is, like for people that are tuning in wondering what are we talking about here?
Yes.
I mean, a lot of it's circulating, a lot of people know, but there's probably people.
Let me try. And Joey, I'm going to start with you because it starts with you. Okay. We wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for you. Okay. And I want to say that Joey is remarkable in terms of his, he's looking at things differently and musically, and he has a great appreciation for Joey, if I don't mind me speaking about you in front of you in this way, but an appreciation for music in a very deep way, and a lot of the music that he recognizes from another time. And so, I knew this about Joey. I knew about the projects he'd done with Les Baxter and stuff he'd done with Mongo Santa Maria and the guys from Studio One. So when I came across Fellove, and this was really, and how did I come across Fellove, was through a guy called Guapacha. When I heard Guapacha, who was a scat singer, a fantastic scat singer, very much in the style of Fellove. In fact, he was a friend of Fellove's, and I just knew this was that Joey would like Fellove because of the same. I knew Joey's taste. We had similar taste in music, and bebop, scat, Latin with Afro-Cuban. I mean, it was ideal for him. So I suggested to him that he do something with Fellove because I knew he was living in Mexico, and because this is the kind of thing he did, and much to my surprise, he came back and said to me, "Hey, guess what? I'm doing the record. I put together a group. I've been going back and forth to Mexico," and he'd done it, And I thought that was fantastic. And then we talked about maybe I could go down. Of course, I was thrilled about the idea of going down to record this. And we had another mutual friend, Drew Carolyn, who I had directed a couple music videos before with. And we went down, we tailed Joey. He was down there weeks before us, but we came afterwards. We tried to kind of stay back a little bit, not get in the way too much while they were rehearsing and preparing the record. Of course, I did get in the way because Fellove was like, "Hey, he's a very nice boy. This guy he couldn't remember my name, and this kid Matteo is very nice, but he's really disrupting the rehearsals." He thought I was like one of the cable wranglers in the video crew.
It was Dak Millen.
So he was, it was great. So we had this experience. For me, first, I think to be filming these rehearsals was great, and the energy, I think, that was terrific during the rehearsals, and to be able to capture that. We only had one camera. It was at a time when people were still using, like mini HD cassette, recorders, and we were a small crew. But I think what would be good is for Joey to talk a little bit about the rehearsal process and working with Fellove, because I can tell you this: the chemistry between he and Fellove was special. That's evident, I'm pleased to say, in the film. That's really beautiful to see the two of you guys together. It's really
And go ahead and say things. And while you're talking, I might be putting up a couple of images that I know that are part of the. And some of them, in fact, we have with us Jacobo Brown. I mean, we'll be talking about part of the personnel, and not just in the music, but the great photographer and all the people involved. So, but I'll let you chat with our audience, and then I'll play some.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much, Matt, for everything you said. I appreciate it. It means a lot, of course, coming from you and coming from anybody. But, we've had a long trajectory here. For those of you who are tuning in or don't know the context, we've been friends for 26 years. We were together as friends in 1994. And record collecting was one of our main things. And honestly,
but I want to say to that, it was the music. It really was the music. And there are people that are just record collectors.
No, this was about the music.
This is about the music.
It was like, and back then everyone was making cassettes. And, if you couldn't find that tangible copy of a record, you would tape it from your friend and you would listen to that tape till it wore out. Okay, I want to give a shout out to a great friend of ours named Filio, who's watching right now, who just said she still has your Cuban junkyard cassette that I copied for her. Matt used to make the best mixed tapes of the most greatest things that he would find in Cuba or New Jersey. But, the trajectory here for me is like, since I was a child, I would find records that I would be fascinated with. And as I got older into my teens and adulthood, some of the people from those records materialized into my life, and we became friends and we made music together. And some of these people were like Al McKibben, Francisco Aguabea, Sir Coxsone Dodd, who was like the Berry Gordy of Jamaican music, at Studio One, Roland Alfonso, who created the Scatolites, Ernest Ranglin, a lot of Mongo Santa Maria, like people who I really like. It's almost an interesting, like a manifestation, if for lack of better terms, or like my stories were right in there for how these people came out of the records. So, Matt found El Wapacha, Al Borsello, right? That's his name.
Amado Marcela.
Armando
Amado Borsello, he with Bebo Valdez Orchestra. He found this compilation album in Cuba, and it had 2 or 3 songs on it. He said, "You got to hear this guy." And then like there was We Got Rhythm. What is it? The documentary that has
with
right?
Chucho playing piano,
right, where it's like some of the early guys from Irakere, I think, before they were Irakere, playing behind
really
El Wapachan. It's like blowing our minds. And so then we found Fellove, and to back up, just to kind of back up a little bit, I found these Descarga and Latin Cuban Jam session records in 1987, 88. And what happened was, right in 1988, Mario Melendez is a longtime friend of mine. He opened up a club in Los Angeles called the King, and he appointed me as the person in charge of all the music, of hiring bands, of creating bands that would play every single week. He wanted interesting music, things that you were not going to find in all the clubs that were typical of the clubs at that point in LA. And I started this Descarga night, and I really didn't know what I was doing. It was my boot camp. It was for how I learned to play this music. And I remember there were certain people I had asked if they wanted to participate that were already in the local like salsa bands, and they were like, "No one's gonna want to do that. No one's gonna want to go to that thing. No one you should just forget about that."
You had Al Israel.
And this thing, after a while, it blew up to where like people like Victor Pantoja was a regular, Francisco Aguabea was a regular. Anytime there was a band like Mongo or Tito Puente, people Papo Vasquez would come in and play, or the different people would come in that were visiting in town, and Johnny Almendra. These people would come in and sit in with the group. And the personnel rotated, but this is how for 5 years, every single Tuesday, I became more and more defined. Eddie Resto, who was Palmieri, right?
Love it.
Me, and he was with the Palmieri brothers and Machito, and like everybody of note in the 70s. He was a very young guy, starting with these people that were older. He was Andy Gonzalez's one of his students and proteges. He helped me. He helped me really put things together. Al McKibben mentored me. And so then I had the fine honor of being in the company of like Bobby Rodriguez many times. And whenever I would see Tito Puente play, be able to speak with him and hang out with him, and Cachao many different times. And so this was like the trinity of with Al McKibben, who defined Latin Afro-Cuban bass playing of the 20th century from the 40s. And so I didn't know that Descarga was something that Fellove was a keystone figure in creating until 20 years after the fact or something. And so, Matt, we're jumping forward to Mexico City then in 1999. Well, 10 years later, I didn't know. And like, even the Cal Jader records I had, that were the old 50s Cal Jader records, were based upon those Cuban jam session records. Even some of the songs were the same, like Perfidia and things. But, we were rehearsing for the Fellove album. And, Fellove was a person who would do something different every single time. He was so free in his expression and creativity that sometimes it was challenging to keep him back on track with the structure of an arrangement, because he would want to go so far out that he would just like get lost in his own like beauty and creativity.
And he was always that way. Like, if you look at the footage of him from the movie, the first film he did was the last Technicolor movie made in Mexico City. It was called La Escuela de Rateros. And he's doing a improvisational scat to Jamaquino. And you can see he's out of sync. He's out of sync. He's not in sync. They probably did the recording right before they filmed. And you can see in the background is Nino Rivera's playing upright bass, right?
Really?
And he starts to go, and his mouth is doing one thing, and because the guy could never do the same thing twice, right? He's so spontaneous, you know? And so to try to get him to do what he just did 2 minutes ago, it was never going to happen, right? Everything was he had to be free, right? I mean,
true. I mean, his takes were so different each time, and if you look carefully in that film clip at the very end, he's back in the audience part of the nightclub seat, and he moonwalks. He does the moonwalk. You don't see his feet, but you see that he's going backwards.
He's gliding backwards. He's
like doing the moonwalk. I mean, they were doing this, I think, in Harlem in the 1920s, but it's not a Michael Jackson thing. Sorry to break the news.
Or even a James Brown thing, right?
The only people that can do that is Felo Bacallao with Orquesta in the 50s, and then Fellove practically, but I really haven't seen that much more.
Yeah, Fellove did it, and I think Jacobo said that. He said, well, Jacobo was like, he knew it from the Michael Jackson moonwalk, and he said, it's Fellove would say, but nothing is like, it's all about how you interpret. Nothing is completely new. Everything is about how you reinterpret it, Yeah. And that thing is just something that came from Africa,
Amazing.
And
we were talking about Jacobo, and I want to share a comment that so many beautiful comments of people. Everyone's, chiming in with beautiful notes. But Jacobo, he wrote, thank you, the great project I have done. That's Jacobo's, message here I wanted to share, because you had such an amazing, and we'll talk about the musicians too, who are part of this amazing recording that is just priceless. And of course, we'll talk about behind the scenes. So Joey or Matt, let's talk about, I know we have Osmani Paredes and Miguelo Valdez, Celio Gonzalez, an icon, of Cuban music since Sonora Matancera and all that, Chocolate Armenteros. Tell me more about the personnel, which combines the traditional musicians, from yesteryear, of course, Fellove, and the younger generation too, like Celio's son and everything.
Well, Miguelo is he's commenting right now. I'm actually, excuse me, when I'm looking down, I'm interacting with people on our lives here.
Thank you. Let me put Miguelo's comment.
Miguelo, he's right here. Saludos. And thank you, Viviam. He says.
There are Miguelo's comments.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah. He was a great friend to Fellove right to the very end.
Yes, and incredible conguero and percussionist, bata player, and these were people that had come and lived. Part of the film is about how Cubans made it over to Mexico before and after the revolution, but primarily in the film about before. But Miguelo, he's a young man. I think he was in his mid-20s, maybe 25 when we made this recording, and he had come over from Cuba with Osmani Paredes, and who's a pianist, an extraordinary pianist. Maybe Miguelo, could you list some of who the horn players were, the other trumpeters? There's two trumpeters. There's Reynaldo, who's since
great flautist.
Reynaldo Pérez on the flute, Alfredo Pina on the trumpet, right?
Thank you. Yes. You've got the facts and figures right there. Yes.
You know me, Joey and Matt.
Yeah, of course. So,
So let's see. So we had Osmani Paredes on the piano and background vocals, Celio Gonzalez Jr., timbales and coro, Miguelito Valdez on the congas and coro, Joey Altruda, bass, producer, arranger of most of the songs. I think it was only a couple that Osmani arranged.
A couple spectacular modern Cuban style arrangements on the album. And these guys, aside from Celio grew up in Mexico. Maybe he was born there, I believe. But I mean, But these other people had played in Cuba. They lived in Mexico City. I think Enrique Jorin was one of the bands they were in, which is a major icon of danzón music.
That's who Osmani came over with.
That's who came over with.
Yeah, that's who he came to Mexico with, was the Jorin group. And the other guy, Fabian Garcia, right? He was the bass player. And he's wonderful. He's in the film, and he's lovely, and he passed on. But he was the bass player on the recording that Fellove did in '79 with Nino Rivera, with Mami Papi.
Oh, yeah.
And he was in the group with Osmani when they came to Mexico, and he went back. And Joey, I've seen pictures with that guy when he showed me, and you would have known a lot of the people because your friend Rudy Regalado was in that, was with him. They were friends. You know?
Yeah.
And
these guys came from, but once again, these young guys that were on this album had come over and stayed in Mexico City. Now Osmani and Miguelo, they're both in New York City for a long time. They came to the big city and made it big in what their field is in the Afro-Cuban world and jazz. It's so inspiring to see their own personal trajectories as musicians, knowing how challenging it can be for any.
Well, you know, I mean, to that point, you know, that was the journey that so many took, was to go. So many Cubans first went to Mexico, and I think we think of, because so many iconic figures like Machito and Miguelito Valdez, perhaps, and certainly Chano Pozo went directly to New York. But the journey often was Mexico, and then the world, you know, and then the United States, obviously. You know, I think, and certainly Mongo Santa Maria went through Mexico first, you know, and Benny Moré was unknown in Cuba, and yet a big star throughout Latin America before.
Yeah, he went to Matamoros, went to Mexico as well. So all of them, but I think it was also that great connection, that a great conversation between Mexico and Cuba. So in other words, there were a lot of Mexicans who would also go to Cuba, and also the Cubans would go to Mexico. So that was a beautiful, even for example, Perez Prado, who had many of the horn players were Mexican, many of the musicians.
No, that's true. Yeah, and I want to just say one other thing. A guy who's in the film, and he's beautiful, I love him, is Tino Contreras. He's a trap drum player, Mexican. I mean, apparently he's got this new hip record out, and I think he's got to be maybe mid-90s now.
He's 94 or 6.
I got a message from him, and he loved Fellove.
Yeah.
He loved Fellove.
Yes.
And he told me when he met Fellove, and Fellove said, "Man, you got to get me to Mexico." This is back in the 50s. And he said, "You want to go to Mexico? I want to stay here, man." He fell in love with Cuba. And all Fellove we talked about was Jose Antonio Mendez and wanting to get to Mexico. So there was definitely this current going back and forth. And Dandy Beltran, who passed away, was a wonderful guy, I loved him very much. He was a Cuban singer who immigrated to Mexico. Jose Antonio Mendez was brought over Fellove was brought over by Jose Antonio Mendez, but another person who brought a lot of Cubans to Mexico was Tin Tan, the comedian, the Mexican comedian. And he brought Dandy over, and he brought over also Jorge Zamorita. And the story that Dandy told, and I didn't get to put it in the film because there's only so much you can do, is he talked about the discrimination that existed at the time. It wasn't as pronounced as it was in North America, but it existed. And the Dandy and Zamorita, who were both black, were not admitted into a nightclub because the color of their skin, and this really angered Tintin, and he said to them, "I want you guys to come to Mexico because you're not going to experience this there. You'll be and that." So Tintin is a very well regarded, I think, among those people who were exiled. He was a good man, and he really was. He was on the right side of things, and but they were back and forth a lot. There was another guy in the film who was with a group called Trio Aveleño, and his name is Miguel Medina, and he was a musician. And he told me, he said, I remember Fellove singing in Cuba. He was Mexican. Trio Aveleño was a Cuban and Mexican trio. They were at the big radio station in Havana, CMAQ. And he remembers hearing Fellove sing, not in the radio station, washing cars on the street in front. But he heard that voice. That's how desperate Fellove was. He was playing for peanuts wherever he could. But the talent was always recognized. He was the guy that they recognized him, and they never forgot him once they saw him. And that he took with him from childhood to the end.
Oh, I see.
Well, go ahead.
I just see some comments from Ileana Casanova here on our Facebook feed that other people that made it through Mexico were Candido Prado, Mariano Merceron, Kiko Mendive, which is kind of like if you're a heavy person into collecting old 78s, you know what that is. But otherwise, people like him are like kind of sadly lost in the annals.
With Silvestre Mendes, they were Kiko
another
Mendive,
great
Silvestre
person.
Mendes.
Yeah, I mean, Matt interviewed Candido, but it didn't make it into the film. I mean, there's like probably we could make an entire YouTube channel on all the extras.
Of course,
something like this that we should make.
I mean,
available.
Such a great.
Candido will be 100 years old in April, so he's one of the longest.
Candido's a beautiful person, man, and he still plays. He still plays, takes care of himself. And,
yes, he does. Yes, he does. There's a lot of really great, a lot of great comments here. For example, Emiliano Diaz, he's saying that he's impressed that Matt Dillon knows all these Cuban musicians and their stories. Good show. So we're getting all these, and he's an actor. So we have, so many beautiful comments that are coming through. Someone else is saying that a great interview. I appreciate music knowledge from the three of you. Makes me happy hearing Matt knowing so much about Cuban music and jazz. I miss Miami and touring with those bands. He's a trombonist, great trombonist from Miami, who's no longer here in Miami.
Oh, wow.
Jacobo is sharing that Miguelito now has a feeling project these days, so we have to be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, his band with his wife is called the Feeling Messengers in New York. Yeah.
Miguelito's amazing, and he's an amazing drummer. And I can tell you from the rumberos here in New York that I play rumba in New York around at venues and in the park, hold him in the highest regard. It's just a great rumbero from Cayo Hueso, which is the neighborhood, the hardcore rumba neighborhood.
Right.
But he told me something, and I want to go back to this because it brings us back to Fellove. And one thing about Miguelito was he was there. He and Fellove had so much in common, Both of them, like Joey, born in October, right? He's got a birthday coming up. Joey, when is your birthday?
I'm on the 22nd.
22nd.
Oh,
these October babies, right? But
you're a Scorpio like me.
Yeah, get the bite.
You lost your man? Let's see.
Oh, I don't know.
He was a neighbor of Dandy Crawford. Can you guys hear me? I think I went out. My picture went out. I
We don't see your camera.
Right. But I'll just say really quickly that Dandy Crawford, he knew him from his neighborhood, and I thought that was incredible. Dandy Crawford is the one who really translated the word feeling from sentimiento. So when they would hear the song, they would hear the word feeling used in all these American jazz numbers. And he was the one, when they were, what is this feeling? He said sentimiento. And he was maybe before Fellove as a scat singer, the difference was that Dandy Crawford scatted, was a beautiful singer, but in a more in a way that was more North American, more in the style of Louis Armstrong or Louis Prima.
Right.
And Fellove, what Fellove did was he took it further and Afro-Cubanized scatting. You know, that's where he was unique. And this young guy, this great scat singer, Guapacha, was a protege of Fellove's in a way. They were friends, but he was much younger than Fellove, and he just wanted to be like Fellove. And somebody told me that one time they saw them, and I tell you who it was Jesus Blanco told me that he witnessed the three of them performing together on stage. Can you imagine Dandy Crawford, Fellove, and Guapacha, all of them scatting at a performance? I can't even imagine. It must have been something.
Only missing Bobby Carcassonne there to, you know.
Well, Bobby Carcassonne is the great grandson, right? I mean, in a way. I mean, he is.
Exactly.
That's the lineage. Dandy Crawford, Fellove, Guapacha, and Bobby Carcassonne. The great Bobby Carcassonne is an enormous talent. And Joey, you're going to meet Bobby. You got to meet Bobby.
Finally.
You guys are like, you got
He's in the film
spirits. Kindred spirits.
I've presented Bobby's concert several times here in Miami, and just in a smaller setting in a big theater, he's just stupendous. As you know, he's full of horn. He's also a showman, the great scatting, plays piano, plays percussion. He's just so talented and very knowledgeable too of music, and of course, follows the lines of Fellove without a doubt. And in the documentary, I know he's part of it, and does beautiful comments about, you know, how important it is what you guys did with this documentary, because in the books there's very little said about Fellove, you know, and
that's true. He's kind of someone who's so cool that people didn't understand him, and so he doesn't get a recognition like, say, what Charlie Parker got, or someone like as prophetic in his own way as someone like Charlie Parker at the same, or Dizzy Gillespie, but he had his own. He's more like Babs Gonzalez.
You know, and I want to bring up another point. He came up in the golden age of television, right? That's when he really came to be. And at that time, television really, for these feeling guys, they weren't never really seen much on television, you know, and it was partially because of discrimination that existed certainly here in the United States, and it existed to some extent in Cuba. And not to say that there weren't, but television was a tough medium, and it's the medium that Fellove needed more than anything, was to be, he was a showman. He needed to have that. And Mexico, the door was wide open for that, you know? And so, you know, he's the first to say, you know, that didn't really click for me. I mean, he was writing songs. He wrote Mango Mangue. Miguelito Valdez made it a hit. And it was made a hit by others later on. And he wrote Bailame Este Mambo, which was done by Quarteta de Aire, and many other songs and stuff Benny Moré recorded.
By Olga Guillot, too. I mean, boleros, everything.
All these things. This is all before he is himself a recording artist. And when you see Fellove and you see the dynamic showmanship and the performance, you can't imagine that there was a period of time, like maybe if he stayed in Cuba, he might not have had the opportunity to do what he did, because he was a natural performer, but it was really in Mexico, and it didn't take much. Didn't take him very long. When he hit Mexico, he hit the ground running. He was working immediately, thanks to his friend Jose Antonio Mendez. He was working with the best musicians that were there, and so it didn't take much. I mean, he was struggling in Cuba, but when he hit Mexico, it happened. It happened immediately, you know.
No, and Mariano Garcia, so Mariano Rivera Conde, who immediately also saw the potential and the talent in this amazing man. And of course, here you have the RCA main guy, the promoter of the big names, and gave him, in fact, the name of El Gran Fellové, which, you know, is him very well. But I think, you know, it's important that he did that, because he was a very important producer and someone who really catapulted.
But you know, for all Fellove's kind of bigger than life persona, he was modest, and he was always quick to point out it was a name that was given to him that he didn't give it to himself, you know. You know.
Well, you know, all of these people we're speaking about, mentioning, are in this film. Either they're interviewed or there's an expose getting accomplished. So it's a little more challenging just hearing these names dropped if you've never heard them and not even seeing photographs. But the person you were just mentioning, the A&R person, Condi Silva, right?
No, Mariano Rivera Condi.
Okay,
he was the
yeah,
A&R
exactly.
man for
Right.
RCA Victor.
This guy,
the star maker of Latin America.
Prado, Benny Morey, Agustin Lara, Negra.
He was the star maker. If he, Mariano Rivera Condi gave you the blessing, that was it. And
Toña La Negra, like superstars. This guy had his sense. He knew, and he got them all signed to RCA Victor, including El Gran Fellové. He gave him the El Gran Fellové. So this whole story is exposed, like put together by Matt, which took a long time to kind of do the detective work and find all this stuff out, because we two guys are a couple gringos that found Latin music because we just vibed with us so hard. We didn't know anything about it.
Well, you know, when you were making
incredible detective story that keeps unfolding, you know.
When Joey was in the middle, you know, under the gun, trying to get this record, you know, done in a very short period of time, I would appeal to Fellove and say, you know, listen, I really, if you have any, you know, old photographs, any sort of thing I can use to sort of put the pieces together, you know, I'd appreciate it. And he did give me something. It was about 5 color Xerox copies of record covers that I already had. And, you know, I think it was just because, yeah, he had old pictures of himself. He had all that stuff. He had old letters. He had everything. But he just was not where his mind was at. He was a future thinking guy. When his contemporaries were making, you know, doing Buena Vista Social Club type stuff, he wanted to do a rap record. He did techno music. He was like, hey, we gotta, you know, and it was a paradoxical thing with him, because as Joey can tell you, like, he was always talking about, like, the youth have to learn from us old guys, but at the same time, he always wanted to do whatever was the new thing, you know. And that was a blessing and a curse for him, by the way. Yeah.
I know, but he was fearless in many ways. He couldn't help it.
Yeah, no, he was always forward thinking, and you know, for those of you people out there watching who don't have a real context, this is a film about a man named Francisco Fellove Valdez. Today would have been his 97th birthday, and it's a story about his friendships with people, and my friendship with Matt, and my friendship with him, and how we all kind of came together. His story goes back to about 1940, creating what we have known for years here in the States as Latin jazz, taking American jazz harmonic sensibility and scat singing and things and putting it with Cuban rhythm. And, you know, in the film, I talk about how the two of us mirrored one another, because I came up in jazz and American music, loving Cuban music, having been brought up around the Banda Brothers and Poncho Sanchez, who was then playing with Cal Tjader when I was a teenager, and my neighbor Bobby Redfield, who was Cal Tjader's guitarist. I mean, I found this music by happenstance in a certain way. I was kind of plunked down in that area of the globe right at that moment, but like, I found Fellove, and we were looking at each other like, wow, this is a kind of a similar story. And it just happened, you know, and his story runs so deep, and it has never been told. There's not a book about this, like what they call feeling is Latin jazz.
You know,
it doesn't exist. And, you know, it's a way more cosmopolitan presentation of Cuban music than something like Buena Vista Social Club. Yeah. Both are very high quality presentations, but this is way more cosmopolitan. This would be like bebop, and the other one is more like.
No, but Celio Senior said, "Yo soy campesino," right?
Yeah.
So he said, I'm a country boy. And, you know, I want to just talk about that for a minute because it was a beautiful thing that when that recording that day, because Celio was retired pretty much. He was living in retirement. And he showed up to visit his son who was playing timbales. And Fellove always relied on a coro, backup singers, and they weren't there. You know, it was going to be recorded after the fact, I think, Joey. And Celio took it upon himself he just walked across. Nobody said, Fellove, Celio, would you help Fellove? He just walked across the stage and went into the booth and started singing with him. It was beautiful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, because to just give a little context here, in the lead singer of like Fellove he's singing what's called inspiración. It's an inspired improvisation over people singing a repetitive chorus. It's African, and so we were going to add the chorus parts afterwards. And so he had to sing a coro and be improvising in between, back and forth. And so here comes Celio Gonzalez from the booth, the control room, and he's like the Frank Sinatra of South America, okay? And he's like, my guy here needs some help with the coro. Let me go in there and give him a hand. And he got so inspired that he sang coro on the rest of the songs.
Aww.
You know, and that's like how humble of a guy he was too. And I'd like to give a shout out to Nenge Hernandez right now, who's watching this. Who's like a great longtime friend who was part of that King Descarga night with me, and he's one of the people that helped form me and inform me and nurture me to become as skilled as I needed to be able to make something like this. So I give a great thank you and gratitude to you, Nenge. You know, and I've got friends here watching, like my friend John Brown is out there. We've known each other since we were in 7th grade. I've got Christina Christie out there from Canada. I got all these great friends that come together. We all come together about this kind of music.
Do any of them have any questions for us? Any questions?
In there. Rocio is here. Congratulations from Rocio.
Ah, Rocio. Rocio is a wonderful woman. She was the manager of Fellove. And she started to manage him. She was really great for Fellove. Helped him to realize his dreams later. And she's just been the best. In fact, it really was when I went down there later when we jump-started the project. That's when I was able, when Rocio said, Matt, I have everything, all the letters, the photographs, it's all here. And I went up, and then I was able to put the pieces together, and there were the pictures of he and Jose Antonio Mendez together, and all the friends and the letters back and forth to his family. Like, even though he left Cuba in 55 and didn't return until 79, he was always in touch. And the letters were, you know, I mean, there was a letter from his mother, sadly, that said, you know, we're waiting for you when you come home. We're going to throw you a big party. That was in 57. He didn't go back till 79. And when he did, she was just so excited to see him that she got drunk and passed out early, and they had to put her to bed.
I know.
And yeah, that's in the film. We talked about that. But, you know, Rocio really, I remember we were up in that dusty, everything it was in boxes, all of his old things. And it was the stuff I had asked Feo before when Joey was making the record with him. I said, and here it all was. And I thought to myself, my God, if I'd had this earlier, this film would have taken a different journey. Maybe, you know, we would have started it even a little bit earlier. You know,
I gotta say the main question, and this is coming from my friend Rosemary Orozco, Lily Dominguez, Adeline Ferro. Omar Godoy is here with us. I don't know. He's a guy who was one of the people who really championed vintage Cuban music in LA. I know this. They're all wondering, when is the record coming out? When is the film coming out? And it's a loaded question. I'll take
I'll leave the record to you and the movie to you if you might have some information I don't have.
Well, I heard that you guys are going to be heading now to in Mexico for your next presentation of in another festival or another in Tamaulipas, is it, or
Yeah, no, in Morelia, there's the
Morelia?
Morelia
Okay.
Film Festival, and it's going to be have its Mexico premiere there. It's one of the best. It's probably the best festival in Latin America. One of the best, if not the best, film. I'm very excited about it. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go because I'll be filming, and with the current situation with the COVID quarantining and insurance, I won't be able to get there. But I will be there in spirit, because I can say that in San Sebastian, I only wish Joey was able to make it. It was really hard, though, to get anybody there, but we did have it was in a beautiful old theater, and it was quite emotional to be presenting the film, because I think that Fellove's heart comes through, his soul comes through. He's such a beautiful singer, and it was great. It was great to finish the film, and present it there like that. So I think it's all good from here. I'm really excited about it. And Joey, the film, we wouldn't have made this film. This film wouldn't have happened if Joey didn't take it upon himself to go find Fellove and make this record. So thank you, Joey.
Thank you. I mean, great pleasure. It's really been one of the most significant moments of my life, is to have a friendship with this guy, whose record, it was a big game changer when I found this music, and to have a friendship with him, but then also to be able to not just play music with him, but to create music with him. It was a profound experience, very humbling experience to see what a real person this guy was. I mean, wow, you'd be lucky to meet someone like this in your lifetime. He was that rare of an individual.
And as far as a subject for a documentary, there are a lot of great artists, but there's very rarely do you get somebody with a personality like that. So that was real. That was really a gift,
Yeah, they don't make show people like this anymore. This is the level of Sammy Davis Jr. And James Brown and Cab Cameron all put into one. I mean, it's that level. You don't get that organic thing. If you do, we don't find out about it. I'm sure it's there somewhere, but we don't find out about it because it's not made into a prefab packaging version of it. But I would like to say,
I'm sorry, Viviam.
You're such a well-rounded person, because you have an innovator, a pioneer, someone who's fearless about what he's doing. He's so young, even at 77 when you guys recorded. I mean, he's fresh with ideas, because you guys allowed him to fly and to be like, his eyes were sparkling. It was nice, everything. And at the same time, a humble person. I mean, I guess he didn't realize how big he was, or didn't matter, because he just had this big heart.
He knew he was great. And I mean that in a good way. I mean, I think he knew he was great, but I think he also, there's a part of, I think an artist, artist's life sometimes. I mean, I don't think he had any question about his ability and his talent, but sometimes, he needed Joey. He needed a Joey, He's a great performer, and he says it in the film. He said, and Nando Alvarice was a DJ here in New York, was interviewing him on a radio, and he's in his 70s, like he's in his late 70s, and he said, "You still think you have something?" And he said, "Yeah, I just need the right people around me." And Joey happened to be that guy, and the young musicians that Joey brought along with him, and he needed that, He wasn't.
You want direction. That's the thing. It does. Like anyone who's a sensible artist, no matter how much they excel and they're developed, they want to know, well, what am I supposed to be doing here? Give me some direction so I'll know what to do, what tool to pull out of the box, if you will. Just to circle back around real quick, like the film is now being shopped to be for a distribution or a platform.
Well, I don't like that word. Shopped. It's out there.
Okay,
We gave birth to the film, and it'll land in the right home, man. We're not shopping anything.
Yeah, okay. You know, someone's out there looking out after us, and the same with the record. The record will come out in all due time, and it'll be coming out coordinated with each other. You know, so.
Well, the record's great, and there's so much, you know, there's so much spontaneity in it, and even the fact, like Joey, years before the record, introduced me to a guy named Chocolate Armenteros, and Joey had worked with him before, and when Joey was making the record, and I was there trying to stay out of the way, which I didn't do a very good job of, I decided to really mix things up, and I said, you know what, Joey was very fond of Chocolate, and Chocolate was very, very fond of Joey, and they had a really good friendship. And so I contacted Chocolate, and he said, I want to bring you down as a birthday present for Joey, you know, but we're not going to say anything, you know. And Joey was, I mean, you were thrilled to see him, but you had to fit Chocolate, and that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. I mean, it was a quality problem.
Yeah, it was a quality problem. I mean, I had already made arrangements for a specific number of instruments to play, put all together. So I had to figure out, well, how could I fit him in? And we did a few songs together and ended up with an extra one. And here's something I want to talk about my friendship with him, because there's a record behind you, and that is Freddie. That record behind you, isn't that record behind you? Is it Freddie? The record album behind you, Viviam?
This one, I'm so sorry. I'm looking at some of the comments. My apologies. Yeah, Freddie, exactly.
It's Freddie. Can you show us this? Can you show us this album? Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Chocolate gave me his album of Freddie. Freddie was a female singer.
Very, very rare. Very special. Okay.
This one, she was an outstanding female vocalist who was not famous. She was a domestic. Chocolate told me she was the cleaning woman at the club.
Correct.
And that she used to sit in with the band. Was it at the Tropicana? Chocolate was the trumpeter in Bebo Valdez's orchestra at the Tropicana for 7 years, from 1950 to 1957. He would work 7 days a week, 7 weeks in a row, all night, go out every night afterwards and do after-hours jam session and party till like 10 in the morning, sleep all day, and start the whole thing again, 7 days a week for 7 weeks in a row, and take 1 week vacation to recuperate. And okay, this is what he told me. And he said, this woman, Freddie, that George Raft discovered her, and he
George Raft,
who played the gangsters in the movies, the guy that was always flipping the coin, who's famous. That's his thing. He was like a doorman was it Tropicana? He was famous for being involved
with the mob and everything, and in movies, yeah.
Yes, but I mean, he was in Cuba at the time, and he bankrolled that record. And Chocolate gave me a bunch of his albums, and that was one of them.
Viviam, when did she die? She died young. She only made the one record, right?
32 or 34 years old. In fact, you know, my father worked with Humberto Suarez, who, as you know, was the director who put together the album for her. And he was in Puerto Rico, where he worked with my father back in 63, 64. And he told my dad that because Freddie had no, professional or musical background, it was hard to really guide her as far as having the big band that he used. However, she was this raw, diamond in the raw, that he said, she's just amazing. I want to record her. And that's why he brought her down to record. And as we know, that was the only thing that she ever recorded. And then she passed away about 35 years old.
Wow. It's a very obscure record too. It's kind of a very odd record. Because when we found it, we were like, who is this?
But did Chocolate play on that record?
Yeah.
So it's almost like there's nothing that Chocolate or no one that Chocolate didn't play with.
Practically nothing. Because
he played with Sexteto Habanero. We can even say that. It was a later incarnation of the band at Marte Bellona, the dance hall. But he did play with everybody. And yet he had never recorded with Fellove. And so them coming together, and when I spoke to him, he said, yeah, I met Fellove in the late 40s the first time. And he was just a kid, you know, Chocolate, who arrived in Havana with his horn. And he hung out at the Musicians Union, and he met all these people, and Fellove was among them.
Right.
But he himself, his story is one of
he's like
he left as well. He came to New York.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people consider him to be like the Louis Armstrong of Cuba. And, you know, he, along with so many of these musicians that were in the big band, the Peñalver brothers on the saxophones and El Negro Vivar, and they were like the guys that were called on all of those albums, like the Wrecking Crew in America or something. They were all right. The trombone player.
Generoso. Oh, Pucho
Generoso, yes. Generoso. They were all guys that were on in those big bands, and the big bands were extraordinary. Oh, Guillermo Barreto. They were all.
And of course
on these albums, tons of albums.
Alfredo de los Reyes.
Yeah. And then you hear them on the Descarga albums, and like they're really showcased in what they can do, that they have to keep kind of pulled back on those big band albums because every part is a very specific thing that takes surgical precision to execute. All of these people were like the top of their game. I mean, I can't even imagine what it must have been like to hear them play all together in a large band together. Oh, I mean, really. So there's a big story here, you know.
There is a big story, and I want to say just, you know, one thing, and it was really, that's one of the things about making this film that I interviewed so many people. I interviewed about 65 different people, a lot of them very old. I interviewed even people like Cesar Portillo de la Luz, you know, and he died 4 days after I interviewed him. And there's so much material there, and it's not going to, it's important for posterity. There were a lot of things, you know, for example, I spoke to Luis Miranda, who's a conguero from Machito, who's Cuban and Puerto Rican. And he told me the story. His drum is on the record cover, on the Fellove record cover. That's him in the picture there. That was his drum. Yeah, he played on a lot of those recordings with Fellove in Mexico. But he told me about the story that I always known about Vergara, the great Cuban drum maker. He was the one to put the keys on the conga drum. And it was Potato's idea. Potato had been in New York and he'd seen, you know, kit drums, you know, traps that had keys on them. He said, can we do that on a conga drum? He brought it to his drum maker
to tune the drum.
Yeah, to tune the drums. And that's and so when he was on his way to Cuba, back to Cuba, Potato said, go see Vergara, and Vergara made him a pair of those drums. So this is history, man. This is important stuff. I don't know if anybody's written about that, but that's an interesting thing. You know, Vergara was the Stradivarius of Cuban drums, congas.
You know, there's so much of this that is unwritten, and I was talking to Matt about this too, because, you know, fortunately, Matt has been able to go on to have friendships with people like Rene Lopez, who's a historian since the 50s, a collector, and people like him have all of this stuff written, like I want to call it trivia for lack of better, not lack of better term, but facts. He has so many facts, and I see this that he's given Matt so much that I was saying to Matt, you know, you should do some Facebook Lives or some YouTube videos where you're talking about specific records and who all the players are.
You know, we call this in the documentary, in making documentary, we call it inside baseball.
Yeah, inside baseball.
So there are people that are interested in factoids and information. And what I learned in putting this film together, is that in order for people to absorb information and absorb facts and numbers and names and dates, it's all fine. They have to feel connected emotionally. They have to feel connectedly emotionally. If I feel something for affection and I feel an emotional connection with Fellove and Joey and Jose Antonio Mendez and myself or whoever, Chocolate, you can then absorb all the data and all the information. But if you don't have that connection, it's for most people, it's going to go one ear and out the other, you know. And the beautiful thing about having, you know, someone like Fellove is that it's all there. He's just heart, you know, and it just comes through. And you know, and I'd say that going back, because when I was there with Joey, when he was making the record, I love this guy, Fellove, who was an incredible personality. But I didn't have much information on him. I didn't have much to go on. But the thing that I really loved was exploring this friendship, the friendships he had with both Jose Antonio Mendez and Nino Rivera. Very important guys. They were two essential people in his life and his development as an artist. And, you know, that's an important thing. My friendship with Joey, the friendship with those guys, the friendship between those people. Friendship is the theme in this film, and that's really important for me. Other films, the themes might be other things. It might be family, but this is about friendship. You know? It is.
No, you know, and Matt and Joey were talking about many of the interviews that you did that were not part of the film because of, you know, the sequence and the whole thing. But this is material that you have in your hands for perhaps something in the future. For example, here I am. I'm going to be sharing a couple of photos we went to, because I heard that we had Malena's husband stopping by.
Yeah. Oh my God! Look at that.
So Elena, Malena, we were there when we were filming in her house. Sharing also when the Albertico Menendez, when he was talking to for a long.
He's got Joey's shirt there. Joey, remember that?
Oh yeah, he borrowed my shirt.
I said, you know, John, my cameraman, I knew he was going to say something when he saw that shirt. He said, Matt, that shirt's it's just terrible with the lighting. And I said, I knew this was going to happen. I said, Joey, do you have a shirt? Do you have a shirt?
Shirt off my back.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
And Gemma Cordero, that was a beautiful thing. Gemma is a great feeling singer. And when I spoke to her, I saw her playing downtown. She played a gig at this jazz club downtown. And she spoke to me about Fellove, that she remembered him in 1979 when he returned. And nobody knew. Nobody in Cuba knew who Fellove was. He left in 1955, and now musical tastes had changed. They were new. They were into different types of music. And she was on a television program, and Fellove was a guest, but nobody knew who he was. Chucho Valdez knew who he was. The older musicians knew who he was. But she didn't know. She was a young girl singing with the coro. And then she said when he got up there and he started to do his thing, it was like, oh my God, who is this guy? You know, it was like they'd never seen anything like it. And yet it did harken back. He was doing things that were distinctly Cuban and style. And that was beautiful. And we were able to do that interview when we were down in Miami with her, you know. And it was like a different generational thing to talk to her about that. It was really great, you know.
I remember, Matt, we ended up going to, I was able to find Felipe Dulzaide's daughter's house.
Yes.
Interview.
This is a guy that you know, Joey, his music, right? I mean, it's very, it's kind of a feeling. His music was like kind of a jazzy feeling thing, wasn't it?
Not sure.
Felipe Dulzaides?
You know, you have his records, Joey. I know it. You like his stuff.
I have so many records, it's hard to keep.
I know. How do you spell his name?
Dulz, Z as in zebra, AIDS.
Oh, yeah.
You have his records.
I think the surviving person from Dulzaide's group is El Flaco Padron, Nelson El Flaco Padron, who also was part of Julio Gutierrez's band, and he's probably His 80s,
Okay,
yeah.
I got one for you out there. And if anybody can answer this, now we're gonna get a little inside baseball.
Oh boy. All right.
Conde, okay, Changuito, the percussionist, said to me, Fellove, yes. He said, Conde Amabile. There was a showman. He was more of a dancer. His name was Conde Amabile. And this is like Loki Bambia. It's like, did it exist or didn't? Did he exist or didn't he exist? He used to hang out at the. Changuito told me about him. He said he was an amazing showman and a dancer, and I love the name. The Kind Count was his name, Conde Amabile. So maybe, what's great about doing these things is somebody will come out and say, Conde Amabile was my cousin. I knew him. I never know it's going to come forward.
Wow.
Let's see. Someone's asking. Let's see, Matt. How do you make that connection so more Americans can appreciate these artists? John Brown's asking.
Well, Joey can answer that one. We quote Duke Ellington, right, Joey? There's only, what is it, Joey? Only good music and bad music. And
I guess, but like that's also
Cuban music is great music.
Some people think that jackhammers outside is makes them happy. What emotional experience do you relate to a noise?
Okay, for me, Cuban music that we like, right?
Well,
Mambo, guaracha, cha-cha-cha, you name it, bolero. This music is not, it's not world music. It is music of the world. It's not some kind of odd ethnic music. This is a music that was like when the mambo took off in Mexico, it was an explosion. It was born in, well, the roots are from Africa, but it took shape as a part of the danzón musically, right? But then it became a movement in Mexico. Perez Prado and I spoke to Robert Farris Thompson, the great historian and art, the guy, the expert really on the diaspora of African music, and he talked about being in Mexico City as a young man in 1950. And hearing the guayeo on the radio, the gung, king, gung, king, gung, king, and he was like, "What is this?" And he went down to the banquet hall in the hotel, and he saw this orchestra playing, and people were dancing, and some danced the jitterbug, and some danced, they were doing different dances because it was so new, the mambo, that they hadn't figured out what the dance was yet. Like the people were just doing what they could. And he grabbed a hold of a waitress and he said, "What am I listening to?" And she screamed at him, "Mambo." And, so this mambo thing took off and it spread throughout the world. And we know what happened. Of course, New York and the Palladium, the mambo was something special, and in Los Angeles. But then even in places like from the Philippines to throughout Latin America, throughout Europe and France, it's something that became international in a way. And I think that is the crossover. I don't think of Afro-Cuban music as something that's some niche. I think it's really, it's like rock and roll. It's like jazz, that's what one of the things Gilberto Zaccaria said. He said, they're so close together. I don't know where one begins and the other ends, that jazz and Cuban music were born together. It's the same.
Of course, Rosemary, once again, she said, Yoruba beats from Africa, let's not forget Mother Earth here and Mother Africa. Thank you for mentioning that. And how do you make the connection so more Americans? This is what John Brown, like I say, I've known John Brown since we were in 7th grade together, and something like Facebook has brought us back together. And Viviam, I met you through Facebook because somehow I saw you comment on something, and I looked at who is this person who's involved in this music, and I saw pictures of you and Candido and Cachao. Who is this person? And this is how friendships happen. And here we are, and there's John Brown. He's asking, how can we help connect people? And I think it's really about telling.
Joey, give him the list that you gave me years ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I say,
And go listen to it, man. You get started
now-
with Tito Puente, Cachao.
Yeah.
You start with the greats, man.
Right. I should put that in the
And
comments.
you listen to that music, you're never going to turn
I
around.
tell you, let's just say the best thing you could do is go find that boxed set of Cuban Jam Session 5 records. They remastered it last year. It's on. I'm sure it's on Spotify.
Yeah.
I mean,
Good stuff, man.
someone asked me this question frequently. Sean Wheeler, I don't know whether he's still watching. He was asked me this a while back, like, what would you recommend something good to get into Cuban music would be? I said that.
Okay, what's your favorite one, Joey? I know mine.
Well, my favorite is like the
Cachao.
Cachao Descarga.
Mine is the Nino Rivera.
Oh, well, you know, it's hard to say.
We listened to that record the first night we met, that Nino Rivera. We listened to that with the pink one.
Yeah.
Great record.
It's incredible stuff. You know, honestly, it's the personal interest stories. You know, if you watch this film, just to kind of clarify to you, John, once you see this film, that's going to be the connection for anyone who was Spanish speaking or non-Spanish speaking. They're going to see what this is about.
Okay, I want to say to that, it was very important to me that the film was not just for people that are into that kind of music. And I'm pleased to say that, you know, it definitely connects with women and men. And those that are like Joey and I, who are like, you know, music nerds. You know, I mean, I'm going to speak for me anyway. I'm a music nerd. And for those that don't know anything about it, you know, and I think that's what I wanted. And I wanted that more than anything else. And again, I go back to the emotional connection, because all the information and all the facts and all that stuff, it's all great, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't connect with the people on an emotional level. And that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, you definitely fall in love with the story of this man, the story of all these other musicians. Like, can you say, you know, the story for you is a story of many other musicians. And then you fall in love with the fact that you guys, like you say, to Americans who fall in love with Cuban music, and this great friendship and how things evolved to do this. Maybe you were doing a documentary and then it ended up being like you're doing the album and you're covering through your documentary, the music that is recorded and how it all evolves so organically. And I think people can really
organically is a good word, because it didn't come together. I mean, Joey did this spontaneous thing to make a record. We talked about me going down there and filming it, and it kind of came together like that. And then in finding, probably one of the more difficult things I've had to do in my professional life was to find what this movie was, the story. I mean, I knew individually that it was some great stuff. Fellove was a brilliant performer. The record these guys did was special. You know, the history of the stuff was really interesting. But finding that and finding out what this, it didn't have this, say, like for example, an unsolved mystery. It wasn't like it didn't have some sensationalistic kind of thing. It's a story that I think everybody can relate to. I think there's a lot of Felloves out there. I feel I'm one of them. I think Joey is. And I think because he was somebody who had this enormous gift, this enormous talent, and this incredible personality, and yet his success was marginal. You know, his name was El Gran Fellové. He wasn't that big. He wasn't that tall. And yet, when he was performing, and Joey can tell you better than anybody because he was there with him and they worked together in that way, he became that. It was like perfect when he was performing. It came to life. You know?
Yeah, no, he was larger than life. And I'd also like to add here that, you know, I made this record in 1999 in 21 years now. And the following summer, I brought Fellove to Los Angeles. And I started recording more songs that were to be the follow-up record. I started creating more content. And I also at the time
had
a
the drawing board.
a mambo orchestra. called Mambo Noir Orchestra. It was an 18-piece orchestra, 4 trumpets, 5 sax, 4 trombones, and Fellove. I had a big show at the Conga Room on Wilshire Boulevard, and Fellove came and he sang El Yo-Yo and San Jose and Chanchullo. I made a big band arrangement of Chanchullo, and Ernest Ranglin was the guitar player. So I had Ernest Ranglin, who's a genius of a guitar player, together with Fellove in a big band, all live.
Ernest Wrangling is a little inside baseball. Ernest Wrangling is one of the great guitar players. Yeah, right? Was he in Nat King Cole? Did he play with Nat King Cole?
No, that's John Collins. But
another guy.
Ernest Ranglin is 88 now, and he's the first guy to play the skank beat of the ska music and reggae since the 50s. Largely responsible for the development of what became reggae music, but a whole separate career in jazz music, playing with people like Sonny Stitt, Monty Alexander. He was the mentor to Monty Alexander.
So when you played with Fellove, when Fellove came down and played with you there, how many nights? Was it one night or?
Well, we did 3 different nights. We did the big band night where he and Ernest Ranglin were the guests in the orchestra. Then we did a separate Ernest Ranglin show with a small group.
Was Plaz Johnson in there?
Plaz Johnson, no, he was not in there, but it was like a 6-piece band. And so Fellove came up and sang with Ernest Ranglin's show. And then I think Ernest Ranglin played with Fellove, did a separate small group show in the small room. I mean,
Joey's fantastic. I'm going to tell you, this guy I just mentioned, Plaz Johnson. Joey's one of Joey's heroes, if I may say, is Mancini. Plaz Johnson played the sax part in the Pink Panther. It's perfect, Joey Altruda.
Yeah, Plaz Johnson is a longtime friend. He's 89 now, and we've been working together since the early 90s. And he was in the Wrecking Crew. He's played with practically everyone since the 50s, like Sarah Vaughan, Eddie Cochran and Gene Vincent, the Beach Boys, Pet Sounds, Steely Dan, Linda Ronstadt, Nelson Riddle, Sinatra, Nat King Cole, like all of these people, Mancini, Pink Panther, all of these people. And to have worked with him on so many different projects is another great person for me, it's an honor to call him a friend, but it's been incredible to put people like that together. I did a recording session while Fellove was in LA that had Ernest Ranglin and also Albert Kibbon on the bass.
Oh, great.
So like putting things together. And so I've got some extra things that are going to come out after the album that will be like the follow-ups. So lots of good things happening here,
Everyone's super looking forward to it, and of course, beautiful comments keep coming up. We're so pleased.
Thank you, Holly, so much.
Great depths of knowledge and love for our Afro-Cuban and jazz music, our life. We have always appreciated his acting, so this connection is awesome. And Joey is fabulous. Thank you, dear Viviam Maria. Love Valsola and Holly.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. All right.
Things coming up. Holly, what is this? In fact, I gave him a book of old Cuban songs. He said Arteaga. He's saying that comment. I don't know. Not sure if it's something for you guys. So there's all these beautiful comments and ideas for future. Matt, any of the material that you guys, or particularly in the one that you filmed, were you thinking of either a future project or maybe donating that to somewhere that people can access it, like a library or collect?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to get this first one. We got to get this one out there, And but of course, it's all there for the future, and it needs to be out there. So, there are so many stories here. I mean, Chocolate, Jose Antonio Mendez. These are all wonderful people. I spoke about Robert Farris Thompson. He's writing a book on the mambo, and he gave me a great interview, and I wasn't able to use it all. But
Did you say you interviewed 65 people for this?
I think it was about 65 people. So you become like a de facto expert of your own, kind of like, you know, not really that I'm an expert, but you just end up talking to all of them. So you kind of, you know, figure stuff out. It was really a pleasure. You know, Leonardo Acosta is one of the great, one of the guys when it comes to Afro-Cuban jazz. He's probably one of the most, and he passed away, but he was so authoritative and really great. So it was a gift to be able to talk to all these folks. And, you know, I want to make sure that the ones who that are still with us, you know, that they get to see it, because it has been a long time in the making, and that's important.
It is. Yeah, folks, we're talking about this film, 20 years in the making. Fellove was 77 when he was recording this magnificent album that we're hoping that will be able to come out, you know, soon, maybe 2021. Let's see. And there's the audience who are very excited about having the opportunity to enjoy El Gran Fellove, the documentary.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Viviam.
Of course. And
wonderful.
Of course, and I know that we'll have more opportunities to do when we'll do a radio show as well, because I have music prepared to share. But there has been so much great conversation that I know that.
Yeah, exactly. Where's the music?
I have lots of it.
Let's go. Let's hear some music now.
I would recommend everyone to go either onto YouTube or Spotify or Pandora or some platform and just look for Fellove music right now, just to get yourself in the mood and see what we're talking about, hear what we're talking about. For those of you who don't know his music, go and look for the Cuban Jam Session albums. Go listen to Fellove. It's his birthday.
Right. Happy birthday, Fellove.
Yeah, happy birthday, Fellove.
Good night, guys.
Who you were and who you are, and your spirit is here. And you know, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Viviam. I deeply appreciate this, and everyone who's watching. It's great. Like, what a miracle we have here, the technology to bring us together like this. So,
all right, thanks, Viviam.
Thank you so much, guys.
Good night, guys.
Everyone,
everyone.
Okay.
Good night. And my friends, as we're coming to a few moments of this live, Viviam Maria Live, what a beautiful, beautiful conversation with Matt Dillon and Joey Altruda, who are with us to celebrate what would have been Fellove's 97th birthday, Francisco Fellove. And again, the documentary is called just like that, El Gran Fellove. That's the name that he was known for throughout his artistic career as a soloist. And the documentary is highly, highly recommended. Again, as you heard, he's going to be heading over now to Mexico, and we're hoping that it will come over to the United States. So we'll have an opportunity to watch it here in different festivals, and in the future, perhaps have also the chance to purchase it. So it's highly recommended, directed by Matt Dillon. It has co-produced by Joey Altruda, who were my special guest this evening. Has beautiful photography. I've been showing you some photos throughout the evening, every once in a while, of some of the making of the documentary. Jacobo Brown, who also was instrumental in taking some very specific photos of Fellove that, in fact, I know in part of the documentary when Fellove passed away, where he was laying el féretro, the casket. It had the beautiful black and white photo that Jacobo did of him. Again, the album is amazing. The documentary is highly, highly recommended. I hope that probably we'll have the chance to have it accessible for all of us to enjoy. I had the opportunity of really viewing it, and every time I watched it, every time I cried, and it's been like 4 or 5 times at least, or maybe 6 or 7 times. So I know that all of you would love it. So with that, we are approaching to the last few moments of the live. Thank you so much for all these beautiful messages. I mean, as I've been presenting some of them on screen. In fact, one time when they were asking me about one of the albums, I was reading some of your special messages here. So thank you for that. Let's put a few more before we conclude. Adeline writes, thank you for this beautiful interview, so inspiring and spark to provoke. Happy birthday, El Gran Fellové, and thank you, Matt and Joey. Thank you, mostly Viviam, for being leader and an example. Thank you, thank you. It's been 25 years for me, I know, since I started in public radio with all this importance about the history of Cuban music and Latin music, and the new generations also that have come through. For example, some of the ones who are members of the band of this recording, as I mentioned before, Celio Gonzalez Jr., Osmani Paredes, Miguel Valdez, some of the younger ones also who are there that we mentioned earlier, and of course the classics like Celio Gonzalez, Fellove, Alfredo Chocolate Armenteros. My work throughout the years with my programs with legendaries such as Chico Farrell, Cachao, Generoso Jimenez, also, wow, Juanito Marquez, who's still a legend. He's 91 years old and he's still part of our Miami community. Candido Camero, who will be 100 years old next year, and we've worked tremendous times. Bobby Carcases, as I mentioned before. So many names that come to my mind that I've had the great honor of working with them. Some of them, obviously, because of, I guess, my age and the time I started working had passed on already. But thankfully, through their music, their albums, their books, their legacy, the new generations is very important. And in the documentary, I know that Fellove mentions about the importance of bringing the younger generations and teaching them about the history, about the tradition, about the elders. They need to learn about that. So coming to new generations, our children, our grandchildren, students, young musicians, inspire them. Again, like Joey recommended, having the Cuban Jam sessions. These are just the amazing 5 albums that I highly recommended of some of the top improvisers of the time period with Descargas. All of Fellove's music, if you can find it, you can. Like I said, I had a lot of music to play for you, but you'll get music from Fellove from the 40s, the 50s. He even went on through this last recording that was done by Joey Altruda and the musicians in 1999, and the additional material that we hope that will be released. So again, look for those music, Bebo Valdez. Look for the classics, El Niño Rivera, if you want to learn more about this, Machito, some of the rare albums, or some of the singers like Celia Cruz. I mentioned Juanito Marquez, of course, who's still with us, and he's an innovator. Juanito Marquez, not just an innovator in the guitar, from a transition to the acoustic to electric guitar. He was doing the ritmo pa' acá, creator of a rhythm. He also was doing arrangements for mega orchestras coming from a small town, in Holguín. So all of these great bands, and I see, for example, here in the chat, Oriente, that is a local band, and they're also keeping alive Cuban music, and they're incorporating new rhythms to it, and they're adding a little other more upbeat, if you may, perhaps, how can we describe it? Oriente just blends Afro-Cuban with jazz and some rock. I mean, they do a great fusion. So there's so much that is coming out of there. Let's see, Holly's mentioning that Le Chat Noir for the next time they pass through Miami. Yes, in fact, when they came back then, I had recommended all these clubs, but because of the time for recording the documentary, unfortunately, we were not even able to go and visit Cristobal Díaz Ayala's collection at FIU because the time was very short. So we ended up just going to see Albertico Menendez, Gema Corredera. We went to do the interview also with in Malena's house. So it was very short that weekend, and Fellove had passed away just a few months, so he was running over to different travels. So I'm hoping that he'll come back and enjoy Le Chat Noir. That is one of those small clubs that they're working so hard to keep not just jazz, but Latin jazz and other forms of music alive in this small, quaint, beautiful downtown location. So if you're locally in Miami, or if you're visiting, be sure to check them out, Le Chat Noir. They're listed in the chat as well. And I'm so happy to see so many beautiful comments from many folks here with us. So Tara, thank you so much. I have my producer here. So just wrapping things up for tonight. And my friends, as a final wrap up, thank you very much for being with us, reminding you that I come to you. And this night was special. I didn't do my regular Cubaneando show, which I always bring to you every Wednesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on 88.9 FM and worldwide. You can enjoy it at wdna.org. And because today is Fellove's birthday, would have been his 97th birthday, and I had my friends and special guests Matt Dillon and Joey Altruda. I did this Facebook live, live with them. However, you can enjoy all this great music, the Fellove music, El Niño Rivera, the jam sessions, Freddy, Machito, Chico Farrell, Cachao, Bebo, Generoso Jimenez, Oriente, so many of these bands. You can enjoy all this beautiful music from yesteryears and new recordings like what Miguel Valdez is doing and what other people are doing. You can definitely enjoy it there on Cubaneando. So again, Wednesdays, 7 p.m., if you're listening online at wdna.org. And I'll put it on the chat. You can enjoy Cubaneando 24 hours a day through Mixcloud.com. So thank you to Willie, my producer, my special guest this evening, and all of you who made this a very, very special celebration for Fellove and for a night to be remembered. Good night, and see you at the next Viviam Maria Live. Thanks again. Good night.